original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good evening, folks. It's Diamond with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. Sorry for the delay there. Bringing you another episode of The Inconvenient Truth, prepping for the Grand Solar Minimum. We're working on getting Piers Corbyn on the phone, and it looks like he might not be available, although we just spoke to him moments ago. Now, Piers Corbyn, he's like his brother, physicist and meteorologist. Piers Corbyn is a man of revolutionary zeal, as many people call him. His own battle, however, is against all the global warming alarmists in the world. Now, he runs the website Weather Action. He is an astrophysicist. He is well-versed in solar physics, and he's the managing director and founder of weatheraction.com, which some of the best long-range forecasters on the planet. And he's even presented at Electric Universe Conference, which I was at a few years back, and I was unaware of that. Which is pretty awesome stuff. So hopefully Scott is going to try to get him on the line. Scott, are you on our line?
Yes, I'm here. Yes. I'm dialing repeatedly.
Okay, let's dial repeatedly, and let's talk about Piers Corbyn. Did you? When did you get a hold of him earlier?
Back when we first set this up, you had sent me his phone number, and I had called him, and I had sent him back kind of a timeline as to, it's kind of early for him. I think it's 3 a.m. for him, but
3 a.m. over there.
Yeah. So I will keep trying. And
did we touch base with him earlier today?
No, I did try, but it never went. He never answered earlier today. I have talked to him back when you first sent me the invite, though. So the number's good. I'm just trying to get him.
Okay,
but he replied back and said the time was good.
Okay, you have anything you want to talk about tonight? We have 2 hours to burn because we don't have a guest.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, go ahead and give everybody just a kind of an update from what's been going on from the Oppenheimer YouTubes that you've been doing for the week, and give me another minute or two to try and reach out to them, and then if not, I've got a couple of good topics, definitely.
Okay, we'll get right back to you. Let's talk about an article coming out today from from the Express. Weather warning: Earth approaching prolonged solar minimum, sparking fears of cold shock. Now, it's interesting how the Express works, going from one side to the other. They'll basically print whatever they want to, talking about global warming alarmism on the one side, and here talking about the approaching solar minimum. So let's dive into the article and see what they have to say. There has been 100 days in 2018 in which the sun does not have sunspots. And if you go look at the statistics, or those of you that are out there that are following the sun as we descend into this minimum, 100 days without spots is the most since the last minimum. So we are indeed approaching a deep minimum, and so far in 2018 we've seen 100 days spotless. And this is leading researchers to believe the Earth should brace itself for a prolonged period of coldness. Now, why would there be coldness? It goes on to say that just a fraction of sunspots have littered our host star this year. Now, the ones that have come around have been quite vigorous. If you follow our channel regularly, you know that even though we're in solar minimum, the sun has still been flaring quite vigorously. And if you follow our channel on a regular basis, maybe 4 to 6 months ago, we shared a paper that came out in the solar physics arena, the plasma physics arena, that revealed the fact that even at solar minimum, there is still risks for large flares. What happens is there's less flares, but there are more small flare packages during minimum, equally as capable of large flaring. And if you also follow our channel, and if you don't, this might be news to you, we are overdue for a Carrington-type event. Now, that would be very bad for our modern world because The grid is not hardened for a Carrington-type event. In fact, it would be catastrophic, and the loss of life would be epic. Not to mention the catastrophe, calamity, and global unrest that would follow some insane event like that. It would literally be life-changing for each and every one of us. We'll have very little warning. Could be as little as 7 to 10 hours if it's a major Earth-facing flare with extreme magnitude. We could have as much as 24 to 36 hours at the top end, probably not that long. But at some point when the word gets out, the stores are going to be packed. Now, according to space weather, as of today, the sun has been without sunspots for 100 days. And if the current trend continues, 2018 will end with a 10-year low in sunspot counts. I think I just said that. This is a sign that solar minimum is approaching, and all the recent papers and forecasts are predicting that solar minimum will not occur until 2020. Meaning we will not, even if we do ascend into a cycle 25, it won't happen until 2020. Now, the Maunder minimum, which saw 7 decades of freezing weather through 6 solar cycles, that began back in 1645 and lasted through 1715 and happened when sunspots were exceedingly rare, which, if you're new to the show, all mainstream science, all breakthroughs in the last 10 years in plasma physics, in statistical analysis with the work of Zarkova, the work of Svensmark, and even coming from CERN of all groups, basically corroborating what Svensmark had been screaming for decades, saying that, yes, cosmic rays cause cloud nucleation in a certain part of the atmosphere, which happens to be the worst part for clouds to form when you're talking about global cooling, because it's exactly in that zone where those clouds reflect the sunlight directly back into space, increasing the albedo effect, which rapidly cools the planet. Now, at the same time, to add insult to injury, these cosmic rays, which are going to be increasing for your entire lifetime through 2100 and beyond, they're going to cause major Earth changes in the form of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. In the historic past, we can go and look and see that at times of high cosmic ray flux is when we get VEI 6 and 7 volcanic eruptions, which, based on the data, is what we're waiting for in the coming years. Now, during the Maunder minimum, during that 6 solar cycle cooling period, like the one we're headed into, temperatures dropped globally 1.3 degrees C. That's it. So if you're thinking that it's going to get freezing cold everywhere and you're down in the equator, it's not going to be like that. 1.3 degrees C is not even noticeable. So instead of 30 degrees in the summer, it'll be 28.7. There will still be seasonality. But overall, the cooling effect causes the jet stream to act erratically, and we have these violent storm fronts, atmospheric compression, hail recycling. So hail grows in size, storms grow in size. They grow in length, duration. They slow down in some cases. And this adds insult to injury, driving crop loss, famine, and global unrest eventually, based on the historical record. So this is what we probably are looking forward to in the future, the very near future, which is why on the channel we say proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance. It's well known that low solar activity is known to have consequences on Earth's weather and climate and society. And what we now know about increased cosmic rays, everyone out there should be picking up what we're putting down.
Yeah,
I hear you, Scott.
I sent out a tickler to him. I shot him another email and tried calling in. So he's not with us quite yet, but I'll keep trying. But in the meantime, there was a couple of things that when you were talking to Lee last week, there are a couple of items that I wanted to get into but we were very much into EMP and protection of from a technical perspective. But there's some facets, and I guess I just want to pick your brain on two things that I think are important. We talked about technical things that you can do to protect your electronics, and we touched upon with Dr. Bailey, we talked about other things about where you're placed, having food. We talked about all those kind of things, but there's a big piece of, I think, a lot of people's life that from a preparedness perspective, something that they should think about is when and if things get difficult, will it, most of us are pretty much, myself included, I'm just from a defensive perspective, I'm a cream puff. I'm not a practiced soldier. I haven't been in the military. And there's a lot of us out there that, if there are no services out there for us anymore, and we have to come back to a time when we, protect ourselves, that someone asked an interesting question once, and it was, you've done all this work, you've built your shelter, you've got your well, you've got your solar, but the first person that comes along and wants to take it, are you actually able to defend it? And I think a lot of people are doing a lot of things to prepare, but I don't think that they're mentally preparing themselves for what it means to actually be in that world where you might have to put somebody in your sights and pull a trigger. And I think that's shocking. It was a shocking thought for me. It's like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of different things, but could I do that? And I just kind of wonder what your thoughts were about what are some of the realities, when we leave this world of convenience. What are some of the realities that you think are going to be a real cold slap in the face for people when they realize what's really gone?
Well,
what's your thoughts?
Scott, here's going to be a real cold slap in the face to you, even though you just revealed to the listeners that you're a cream puff. Now, Scott's a gigantic man, and if you don't know him and he were to approach you and even try to be slightly menacing, you would run, because he is a man of extreme stature. And we're not talking like a fat Burger King guy. We're talking like a tight end type gigantic human. It probably has a little Anunnaki in him. But he can cry like a baby, and he's a softie that way, which is not a bad thing. I respect him for that. But he came up here and he practiced his little bug out scenario for the first time. He had bought the whole gamut of prepper tent stuff and solar setup. So real quick, before I continue with the thought that you threw out there, we have a lot to talk about on this, which is amazing that you brought it up. Real quick, tell them what you prepped to do and tell them how your little setup went and how all that went on your first try. Now, he's going to describe a scenario like, let's say the shit hits the fan, a VEI-8 hits, the Earth's about to get dark, and a solar flare is coming. So within 2 weeks, the grid's going to be fried and everyone's going to be panicking, and you need to bug out. So he came up here and he deployed his stuff. Now you can tell him how much it cost or what you got and what happened.
Right. So I had come and practice the bug out. I was, you talk about a community that you're trying to build there. So it was also to come up and, see how I fit in, because I think that's another piece of it is, maybe in a community, if you're not Kung Fu, or if you're not Dirty Harry, maybe you're real good at planting, and so maybe someone's going to take care of the guns and you're going to take care of the dirt. So, that's a part of having a community. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but yeah, what I did is I said, I, like a lot of people that are probably listening, I live in a city, and I got neighbors 10 feet away on either side. And, you know, if anything happened, I'm like most people. I haven't gone up and down the street and introduced myself. And certainly if I did anything more than go up and down the street, I mean, they'd probably be freak out if I just came up and down the street and introduced myself. But, you know, certainly to go any further with anyone.
He must be drunk.
Yeah, exactly. You got the wrong house. And so probably half the people wouldn't answer the door if I came up to the door. But, you know, I have no community here. And it's just because everyone works all day and they come home and they drive into their garage and close the door behind themselves. You know, no one's outside. And so it's, you know, like everyone, I'm sure, just like for me, it's hard to reach out to people and try and build a community where you're at. So, you know, lacking that and assuming that, you know, there's a lot of stuff already happening. I mean, we're already in the grand solar minimum, you know, and just, you know, kind of a tangent to the grand solar minimum, you know, the economy, you know, is got questionable metrics going on there. So, I mean, there could be another 2008, 2009.
3 years.
Yeah. I mean, so, you know, so we all go on pretending, except for Diamond, we all go pretending like, you know, we're running on borrowed time. You know, it's like we're trying to go to work each day and pay bills and juggle being ready to take off if we have to. So I think that's not a good way to be, but it is the way it is. And so yeah, what I had put together basically just a set of things that, you know, you could leave your house with and still be comfortable. You know, I brought some of the.
You brought a house.
People buy the. It was a pretty darn big tent, wasn't it?
What is it? It's like a prepper tent.
Yeah, it's a safari tent, and it's like big enough that, you know, you can sleep in it. You could set up a table and chairs inside of it. So it was a small house, wasn't it?
Yeah, you could
it certainly was a two-person event.
With your buddies and had 2 bunks, sleeps 4, and it was pretty nice. And it was extremely sturdy. If you tied this down right, it could withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds and all that.
Yep. And so it was a tent that was designed to, you know, it wasn't a $50 tent that, you know, would last a weekend and it would tear in the corner or at the window. So I put some money into a tent because I didn't know where to go. You know, I don't have property somewhere else yet. And I said, well, the best I can do is just go somewhere else, you know, when the time came. Certainly anywhere's better than the city. So it was a pile of things that, you know, the tent, there was a sleeping bag, there was a mattress, a fold-out table. I had a can of gas, and I had a burner that I could use to get some coffee going, if nothing else. And then I'll tell you something that I tried that I guess in the end I didn't like the way it worked out too well. So what I had a 4-panel solar. It was a Goal Zero, I believe. And I had a 4-panel unit, and I said, well, instead of trying to have a refrigerator, maybe I'll just get an ice maker and I can put ice in these ice chests, a Coleman kind of chest. So I said, well, I'll give that a try. And I think I would need more capacity from the battery to keep the ice going. And it was a royal pain to have to, every time some ice came out, you know, 8 cubes, that you'd have to go move them from one place to the other. So it seemed like a good idea at the time, but it stunk. So in the meantime, I've gone out and procured just a small refrigerator that runs on 12 volts. So that I'll just run that off my panels then. And so that's my next experiment. I'm going to actually break that out this week. I just got the fridge, and I'm going to put up my 4 panels and my battery and see if the battery can keep, you know, with the sun that it gets each day, can sustain this small refrigerator running. So
it's a DC fridge?
Yeah, it's a DC fridge. What was it called exactly? I don't know off the top of my head, but Yeah, it was a DC fridge, and it can work on 110, or it can work AC or DC, and it switches over automatically. So, and it has a very low usage compressor on it, so it looks like it's going to work real well.
Yeah, we had a DC fridge in our trailer, and it's propane assist, and it works fine with a tiny panel and a 2-battery setup. And that's a full-size fridge.
Oh, okay, yeah. So had you so
let me break the
what do you
bad news to you.
Yeah.
So you came up and you set up. It took all day for you to set up the tent. And the guys that were around here were like, geez, if he tried to do that when a shit hits the fan situation, and he didn't know where he was at, almost instantly someone would just come and take all your shit. They would point guns at your face, and you would give them everything. They would be like, look at this guy. We're taking all your stuff. And they would leave you there with your underwear. And so that's what the people around me told me quickly after they saw you. They said, oh, my God, that guy's going to get all his shit taken in 5 seconds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the point you bring up is
why was
very
that?
important.
Just I had too mumuch stuff?
Because it was all brand new. You had too much stuff, and they knew you didn't have any weapons. They could sense that you wouldn't fight back. Well, they could sense probably that you wouldn't fight back if they pointed a gun at you. You'd just give it to them. People are good judges of character. I don't know if you would you be able to fight back, or what would you do in a scenario if someone came with guns and you weren't prepared? Would you just let them take the shit?
That's a good question. Is a pile of tents and poles, and does it matter that much? Are they going to shoot you anyway, right?
You can't go back to the city. There's no electric. You made it out. Everyone else didn't. And here's a guy, 3 guys with guns. You have your pistol. It's over there if you run. You also know that the chance of you getting it before they kill you is 0. What do you do? You just give them the shit?
Go down swinging? Or no, these are things, like I said, I'm bringing it up because it's reality that you have to think about. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm determined to be able to react, certainly right now it's still normal. I mean, as far as normal is, I can go out and walk around the block and not worry about it at all. I mean, like anytime, anything can happen, but certainly there's no anarchy right now. When the time comes and I pick up the pistol that's, sitting in the safe, and I say it's time that this needs to be closer to me. Maybe it's that at that moment I just flip the switch in my head and say, okay, this is a new time, and this is going to require me to, sight somebody up and decide when to pull. And you got to think about it ahead of time, because there's a lot of crafty people that are going to try and get in close to you and have no problem, removing you from the situation. So
yeah, your best new friend is going to be the guy that puts a bullet in your head and steals all your shit.
Yeah, it's all over. I'm done. That's my thing.
If you think about defending yourself, you need to go to a gun class. You need to start learning about weapons. You need to learn about how weapons feel, all different types, rifles, pistols, handguns, knives, and decide for yourself what you think you're the most comfortable in self-defense with. Take a class on that and then practice using that weapon. I highly implore everyone to learn how to use a pistol and a rifle and a shotgun. Those 3 things I think are key in the future. A shotgun because it's good in the dark and sprays a large area. It's a very violently exploding gun, so it gets you used to loud noises and recoil quickly. It's easy to load. They're big, giant shells. You don't have to fumble around with tiny bullets. So a shotgun is an easy entry into the loud, explosive firearms. Rifles are good to get to know how to hit targets accurately. If you can't hit a target accurately with a rifle, you're screwed because it won't get better. And then the pistol is your last stop, but you need to go to a range. You need to go to the national forest and shoot the weapons a lot in different situations, kneeling, walking, running, sitting, standing, at different distances, and get very familiar and spend a lot of money on rounds. Then and only then will you be capable of defending yourself.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I do have. I have a 9mm that I have a concealed carry. So when I'm ready to conceal carry, I'll be concealed carry. But I also have a 30-30. I like the idea of that because, the first year or so, the first month or so, people will be spraying their their ARs and there'll be bullets going everywhere. And as long as you stay out of the way, I have enough 30-30 shells to last a lifetime. But the nice thing is, it's a good, powerful shell, but you're not wasting ammunition with it. Spraying multiple bullets at a time. You just, line it up and
you're taking out one zombie at a time.
Yep. And hopefully I have some other people with me so we can get multiple. But yeah, so I have.
If you're out there, a 30-30, a repeater gun, a gun that holds up to 10 rounds up in the barrel or in a clip, highly recommended. What type of 30-30 do you have, Scott?
1894 Winchester. It's the old, cowboy rifle that everyone's used to seeing. It's got the.
So you slide the bullets down the barrel.
No, you load. There's got a compartment. You on the side, there's like a little spring-loaded compartment, and you load these the 30-30 shells in there, and then you just it's got the lever. It's a lever gun. So you crank down once, lift the lever back up, and it'll load a shell into the magazine.
Bolt action.
Or into the chamber. So the magazine has like I think it can hold about eight shells. Right. Yeah. So, but it's just a conservative weapon that's very accurate, and it's very good in the woods because if you're in a wooded area, because usually in the woods you can't see. You don't need a scope because you're just you put 100 feet of trees between you and the distance, and you can't see anything. So it's a good range it's a good weapon for mid to short range. It's not some sniper rifle. So, but that's the problem with going into that future is, if there are people with who are snipers and they decide they want what they want, they can take you out one at a time. And you never see where they're at or where they're coming from. So it's kind of discouraging in that sense where, you can have a pistol and you can have a rifle and a shotgun, but, there's always someone who's more trained and has a farther reach than you do. So it's not like the old days when you got upset with someone and you just punched them in the nose. Now everything is to the death. So, yeah, I don't know what to do about someone who's a mile out. What did you say?
You better be friends with all your neighbors.
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, I have what I need in that arena, and I do go out to the range, and I've one time I spent so much time on my on the rifle that from the recoil it had completely bruised my shoulder. So you don't want to spend too much time with that much kick. I ended up with a big old bruise on when I got home. So,
because
but anyway, so
the gun wasn't tightly against your shoulder when you pulled the trigger.
It was tightly against it, but it was just wood. So
you got a bumper now.
Since then, I have a piece that goes on the end of it. Yeah, bumper. So, but yeah, the wood just going up against there, and you empty a couple of boxes, and your shoulder's pretty much done with that. It's a pretty big boom. I mean, that rifle is definitely got a kick to it. But anyway, so yeah, you're right though. I have in a normal situation, if Scott just goes out camping, I have camping equipment and food that could feed me for a while, and a water filter. I've got one of the, I got a nice water filter. And so I had all the things. Yeah, I had a big Berkey, and I had some, had a couple of plastic pails that I could go down to the river. And, I wanted to try out your river water. So I put river water into the Berkey, and that's what I was drinking. And so it was interesting. I'd say the only thing is my tent is too big for one person to put up, and it says so, but I tried it anyway. So yes, it took all day. Definitely. So yes, I was able to practice with the equipment. I also have just kind of a utility trailer that I'm going to put all this stuff in, so I don't have to so it'll be a little bit more ready to go than going in the garage and bringing out piece by piece and putting it in the truck. I do have a utility trailer that I'm going to put all this stuff in. That way it's a little bit more ready to go. But I don't yet have a permanent place yet. So that's probably the next thing I need to do. But like I was, going back to my point though, is it's something that everybody's going to have to do, because I think when, between the time when and if things do fall apart and some semblance of civilization comes back again, there is going to be a period where you need to either step up and say, I've got this weapon and I'm going to defend myself, but you really need to think about what that means, because it just doesn't do any good to have a pistol and be out by yourself. You still need to travel with multiple people, and you need to be aware of the fact that, for all you're trying, people can reach out from vast distances and remove you. So that's the dilemma there, is there's going to be a period of time possibly where, maybe the best thing to do is to be somewhat obscured, not run off into the forest and hide, but certainly make it a point to not be outside as much as you might have been before, if that makes any sense. I don't know how to get around, people who are hiding in the bushes that you can't see. I don't know what to do about that.
When we were having a discussion with Lee, well, first, you have to determine what the scenarios that may occur and how they may unfold. The only way that a scenario would occur when you need to stay in place after you bug out and lay low for a long period of time would be in an entire grid down situation. Because as soon as the evil people find out that the grid is going to be down for a long time, the looting will occur within 24 hours. And it's going to be dangerous for weeks. Anyone that goes out will be raped or mugged. They'll be looted themselves. So in that type of scenario, you don't want to travel around when the grid's down until you know it's safe. And that would be where the governments or whatever, they make it state of emergency and they get the military on the ground, enough of which where you can drive around safely, where there's some protection on the streets. So I wouldn't recommend any travel in that situation. And that's the situation, the only one we're really talking about. The dangerous one is the grid down. The onset of the grand solar minimum and crop loss leading to spikes in prices, that type of a scenario moving forward with increased volcanism, with the VEI6 happening, causing everyone in Indonesia to freak out or to die from a tsunami, that's going to cause global unrest that slowly happens while we watch it on CNN and YouTube and Oppenheimer Ranch Project. So we're going to watch it happen, and we'll know when we have to move in that scenario, which is the most likely. A slow unwinding of the natural events, which slowly causes society to crumble worse and worse. There's more people hungry. There's lines. They move everyone into the smart, quote-unquote, cities. Agenda 21 has begun. The people in the rural areas are left alone. It'll be a slow process. I believe that's the most likely scenario. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there is a there's always a chance that something instantaneous can happen. But like you said, if we keep descending at a slow, steady pace and things slowly deteriorate, which is most likely what would happen, can there be a large EMP event? Yes. And everything could happen all at once. But barring that, the most obvious thing is just what's always been happening. I mean, it's been happening since I was born. The United States has been decaying in a certain sense. As
infrastructure, finances, jobs, all that decaying. The American dream is the American forest.
Yeah, respect for people. People, being civil. So yeah, I think you're right. I think if I had to lay my odds out there, it would be definitely that things will decay in a steady fashion, and hopefully, if once I decide, that this is the place I'd like to go, I would just have to get there. I wouldn't want to be in a position when the time comes that says, oh, I've got some food or something, and I think I need to take that to my location. It's like, I don't think you want to be, once things get topsy-turvy, I don't think you want to be out and about with your brand new tent and your box full of food. I think that already needs to be where you're going.
Or you need to be driving really quick with a bunch of people with guns looking out the rear window.
You know what? I was talking to this guy in Phoenix, and they don't have a lot of these for sale. I guess they destroy them generally, but he has an old armored vehicle. I said, that's sweet. You just load the family up in that thing and 90 miles an hour to wherever you're going. So, but yeah, it was kind of along the lines of the bus that Lee was talking about.
The bug out bus is a badass idea. I love the bug out bus.
Yeah. And so yeah, I was. I said, well, that's a possibility, but the first thing I would need to do is, like I said, I'm waiting to be in a position where I can at least get a piece of property, and then I can, stage some stuff there and not have to, if the time comes, I don't have to drag it all with me. I just go. And if I had to abandon the car or whatever, I still have feet, so, but I wouldn't have to take anything more than a backpack with me. So that's my thought.
The most likely scenario I see moving forward is the first thing that happens is the financial markets start to collapse within the next 2 years. We'll get a clearer picture on when that will happen. It could be as early as this fall or as late as next fall. And that will begin some of the tensions between countries. We may see some local wars, some more tariffs and all that nonsense. And then there'll be shortages of crops by then. By next fall, we're going to see the spike in grain as predicted through Armstrong economics and all the solar predictors from past historical dynamics. Next fall, you should be long on oats because that's when the global grain spike should start occurring. And if the financial markets are collapsing at that time and the weather is getting worse, we're going to have huge cataclysms regionally while this is all happening. So at that point, you're going to have time to be like, let's go. That'll be the time when people start migrating, so to speak. And then in the interim, shortly after that, we're going to have large earthquakes, volcanoes going off, and a huge flare which fries the grid at some point. In 5 years from now, could be sooner, but that's going to just lead to more chaos, and you're going to be needing to be in your community at that point, working on self-sufficiency to survive and thrive in the future. So it's a slow process of decay followed by massive catastrophe and calamity to drive it on home and end the empire. All this is occurring in the next 15 years, and that's a long-term forecast, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what else do you want to talk about, Scott?
So I guess just to finish up that subject, then where do you? I mean, you've met a lot of people in your time. Do you, when the time comes, and let's say you're still able to get something to defend yourself with, a pistol or a shotgun or something, how would you? Have you ever thought through how you should, or how someone should callous themselves, if you will, such that they would use the weapon without thinking about it? I mean, is it just practice shooting at a target that brings you to that point where you could point it at someone and pull a trigger? Or, how would you recommend somebody, other than just target practicing? I mean, certainly not saying go out shoot anybody, but what is it mentally that you have to put in your head so that you can do that?
Well, if the scenario is right, it's all based on the situation. If people are coming, obviously, to put you in harm's way, you and your loved ones or a group, it's very easy that they become a target instead of another loving human being, because that's absolutely what they aren't. They're an evil entity coming to harm you and the other people, so you're just simply protecting your group.
Right.
And that's an easy thing to do. You definitely should have people, military personnel in the group, or people capable of doing that, or you're going to be totally screwed. And I believe that the situation will change many people's mindsets. Many people out there are like, oh, I could never do that. I could never take a life, blah, blah, blah. The reality is simple. If something crazy happened, humans are still going to be humans. It's not easy to point a weapon at another human being unless you're of absolute lunatic. It's very difficult to kill another life unless you're an absolute sociopath or lunatic. Most people, 80 to 90% of people are compassionate, which is why dueling worked out so well, because it was a gentleman's bet, and shit, you got to keep your word. It's hard to kill someone unless you give your word.
Yes.
So that's the only time you can forcefully kill someone if you don't want to, because he's going to kill you, and I gave my word. So that's literally how it works, I think, but you can't know until you know. If the skies are dark and a solar flare has fried the grid and the planet is burning, people are going to be desperate, so you're going to be shooting to kill probably. Unless people come up the road and they're smart and they're all holding sticks with white shirts on them, you're not going to shoot them. You're going to bring them into your group. So I don't think the decision is going to be just callous murder of people to stay safe. That's in a video game. But it may come to that. If people are coming to harm you, you will have to react or you'll be screwed.
Yeah. And it all goes to, time-tested. It never really worked anyway, because every king and emperor and sergeant, they always got killed by somebody under them. But it's, when you bring people in, you want to bring in people that you trust and that are not devious and have, when you're not looking, they're going to take what you have. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing, is you can be compassionate, but how do you be compassionate intelligently, where you don't, again.
Well, I think that the way that you
gotta.
I think that the way that you prepare, Scott, has a lot to do with it. You can't just. So if you're someone who thinks that you're going to have a warehouse full of commodities and that's how you're going to survive in the future, you're probably screwed, because people are going to get wind of that, and everyone's going to come and take your stuff.
Right.
You can not have large caches of things and think you're going to get by. But what you need to develop are sustainable systems that people can't steal from you, that you have to work at in order for them to provide for you. Like a permaculture farm with greenhouses. You have to constantly be working on that. You can't just, if you stop, everyone starves. It's not something you can come and take. You could come take all the vegetables one day, but then the next week everyone's going to be hungry.
Right.
So you're less likely to get robbed of your sustainability practices than if you think you're going to be a Walmart and stockpile stuff. You should always stockpile stuff, but people shouldn't know how much you have. You could show people a small cachet when you actually have 50 times that. You can then do a Jesus trick and provide for hundreds of people to eat, and they all think it's coming from that one closet or something. So you don't want to draw attention to what you have ever. That's a big part of the future. But you want to be inclusive and nice and compassionate, because I think that's the way that we're going to shift, because a large amount of the population is going to die in the next few decades, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's real good.
By design.
And that, whose design?
Well, it's part of Agenda 21, and we can't pinpoint it. People will say Bilderberg's, Illuminati. It's the elites, knowing they can still make the same amount of money with a different control mechanism with the smaller population.
They can make the same amount?
Well, it will be more compartmentalized. You can't control this many billion people. It's very difficult. Think about how the difficulty they're having with censuses, and think about the nonsense of the unemployment number.
Yeah, it's the people who haven't been looking for a job for more than a week, or for less than a week. Most, I think, 40%.
Scott, you're breaking up pretty bad. Can you repeat that?
Not working or not.
Scott, you're breaking up. Repeat that.
For percentage of the workforce. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, not working. People always said, "Oh my gosh, if we lose too many jobs, we're gonna, it's going to be anarchy. Everybody's going to be on the street." Well, it's surprising how resilient and how, well, if nothing else, lazy people are, because as a lot of families, so mom and dad have two kids. So mom and dad have their house, and when the kids get older, instead of like in the old days when you stayed with your family, they, the kids will go out and they'll get their own house and their own cars, and but if times got really tough, people can move back in together. So there's a lot of room for collapsing of this expectation that everybody has. Everybody deserves their own house, and everybody deserves a car and health care, and that's nice, and it'd be great if we could give that. But if that turns out to not be true, then I've seen a lot of people that are making do in very big ways. They've moved down, or they don't have the money for it. So so anyway, so we talked about the very far extreme of, oh my gosh, this person is coming up the street, and we've dealt with, what are you going to do? And then you touched upon it. Surprisingly, you touched upon the next subject that I wanted to get into, and that's a piece that always gets left out of all these lists that you see is purpose. It's one thing. Okay, I've got safety, I've got food, shelter, I've got clothes, I've got food, but there gets to a point, and it's like, okay, so you've made it past this siege, this shit hitting the fan, and you're in the right place, but the thing that people need at that point is they need to have a purpose, so I think people need to start thinking about the fact that, what if things were to go down and we were to roll the clock back to 1800s way of living, how would you find purpose in life?
Scott, I'll tell you what happens. You wake up, and the first thing you do is start working, and then you work until the sun sets, and then you do a radio show, and hopefully you've done enough to provide enough food to eat. Living, working to live takes all day. So your purpose is abundance. And however hard you work is how abundant your life will be in the future. You need to have fresh water. You need to dispose of your waste. You need to be doing biodynamic farming, raising protein and plants. You need to be wildcrafting and wild harvesting, grabbing supplies. And this all has to be worked into your 12 to 14-hour daily schedule. So your purpose becomes living. And then you learn to live harmoniously with the seasons in the area that you're at, and you learn from nature, and then the world becomes your university, and it's the first time where you actually learn what's real, and you exist life in the moment. There are no more distractions. The noises in your head go away. People will live very long and fruitful lives in this manner. Historical evidence has shown that.
So that's, and if you don't mind, I mean, this part of it, the conversation could get a little personal, but I wanted to, when we were talking at one point, we got into some spiritual topics, I guess we'd call them, and I think a good part of moving out of civilization and into more of a subsistence kind of living, there will be a regaining of a certain amount of spirituality. What type of spirituality do you see? Do you personally have with your environment that you're in right now? Can you describe your of course, I don't mean religion, I mean spirituality. I mean, how do you see things working in and around you as you become more closer to being a subsistence type in the moment type person?
Yeah, well, it's a process. So, and I can tell you, it has a lot to do with people's life history and what they've gone through in their lives. But when if the grid were to shut down and 90% of the population were to die off, and we will be back at the beginning in the Stone Age working to start over again, what happens innately is people return to source. So all natives talk about the powers of the universe, the mother goddess. All cultures return to the source, which is witnessing your environment and the glory around you of life and how it happens automatically. Like no one's taken notes. It's been going on for millions and millions of years. It's unfathomable, but no one has time to connect with the universe and their natural environment like that. It's designed to detach you. Fluoride in the water, brainwashing on the boob tube, inane work schedules with menial tasks for the majority of the public lead to them separating themselves from source. If you study all religions that go back to the spiritual source, the spirituality that emerges from all cultures comes from within, and that comes from reflecting on the moment. So everyone at that point will be able to, your job in life from the moment you wake up to go to bed is to provide for yourself and your family. You'll be reflecting on the moment every moment. So spirituality is a big key, and I think it has to do with the uplifting of societies. Even though the society is being crushed by the climate, the small groups that exist, I mean, let's think about a minor shift back in the Dalton minimum or the Maunder minimum, for instance. Very minor perturbation, right? 1 degree C change, and yet we have the Renaissance because people had a lot of time. They were inside. It was freezing out. They sat inside all day. So it's like the boredom you're speaking of is what sparks arts and culture and spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you bring up a very good point. Is, when I said you have to find your purpose, well, your purpose becomes, a daily chore, a daily task or process of getting food, getting water, getting heat, keeping yourself warm, clothes. But as you do each one of those things, and people have looked into spirituality a little bit and living in the moment. I mean, that's key to many religions, is as you settle into the moment, and whatever you're doing, however menial you think it might be, it's 100% purposeful if you do it with intent. So
we're going to end on spirituality with Scott McDonough and Diamond on the Inconvenient Truth. We'll be back and talk about topics like record flooding in Japan and obfuscating the truth by the warmists. Did you know that 2018 is going to set a record? It's the 14th hottest ever. We'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea. I'm coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good evening, folks, and we're back. This is Diamond and Scott on the Inconvenient Truth, prepping for the Grand Solar Minimum. Piers Corbyn apparently fell asleep, and is maybe we'll find out what happened, and we'll get him on the show next week. He was kind of stoked to be on the show, so I don't know why his phone's off, especially because we just contacted him. But things happen. This is, crazy times. I'm sure we'll have him back on the show. We also have to look forward to Judith Curry, an awesome female scientist. She's not buying into the global warming alarmism. She is certainly a scientist with a backbone. She's going to be joining us later in the summer. She's busy, probably on vacation, but obviously has seen the show and likes what we're doing. Scott, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. Do you have any more thoughts on the spiritual nature of the shift that's occurring? And this shift, Scott, is not. It's talked about in the Vedas. I know you watch the show pretty regularly. Did you see the episode when I mentioned the work of Randall Carlson and the Great Year?
No, I did not see that one. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it was just the other night. And what I was pointing out to our subscribers is that the Grand Solar Minimum drop-off we're on, the Eddy Minimum, is one of the bigger ones. And if you look at the GISP-2 ice core data we show on the show, the bond cycle happens every 1,000 years, which is the empire-ending giant Grand Solar Minimum, the one that took out the Vikings, the Minoans, the Romans, and now the modern humans. But this one also coincides with the end of the interstadial. Do you know the significance of that, Scott?
No. Mm-mm.
So it's the end of the warm period before the next glacial period. And we're actually on that drop-off. So the magnetic reversal has to do with that portion of the drop-off. So, and that can drive temperature as low as 10 degrees in the next 200 to 300 years. Bringing us back into a deep glacial cycle, which lasts for another 12,000 years until the planet warms again.
I can't wait 12,000 years.
No, but the planet is never going to be warmer than when you were younger. Each subsequent solar cycle, as we move forward, is going to be more diminished as total solar irradiance continues to drop. So there will never be a heat wave like 2016 or 1934 ever again. Did we lose you, Scott?
No, I just found that very sad. So,
you like heat waves?
No, I just the idea that something won't be back again for thousands of years. Yeah, I'm at a loss for words almost. That's quite shocking. So just to pull things back into a time frame that is more immediate. Right now, there's a couple of incidents that have been happening, and maybe I get your clarification on it. We've been talking about the fact that, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, that we're down to a minimum number of sunspots in the last, 0 sunspots in, what was it, 10 days or 100 days?
We've had 100 spotless days in the first 7 months.
Okay.
So that's about 60 to 70% spotless days. Almost, we're approaching all spotless days.
Okay. And so right now we're in what they call, are we leaving the cycle 24? Are we still in it?
We're still in it. We're descending off of the backside of 24, and we're going to continue to get lower and lower for up to 18 to 36 months. 18 would be the short end. 36 is the long end. So we won't start coming back out of the cycle at least until 2020, if at all.
Okay.
So there are some groups of solar physicists that think that there might not be a cycle 25 because of the diminishing magnetosphere. It may never come back. We might skip a few. 25, 26 might be non-existent, meaning the sun will be spotless for decades. That would be very bad news for planet Earth. So that's the one extreme scenario. The mainstream, the warmists think that we're entering cycle 25 right now, and everything's going to come back and it's going to be great. But there's very few of them, because what's lining up right now in the mainstream of solar physics and plasma physics is a 30 to 50% diminishment in cycle 25, while the TSI continues to decline continuously. So even though it's coming back up, and there'll be some spots and flaring in the grid fries, it's not going to warm the planet all that much. We're going to continue to get colder.
Okay. So, and that was kind of my question too, is I know that there's been, as I listen to various news reports and look, go to different websites, they refer to the fact that, we've already left 24 and we're moving into 25 and already. And I was wondering how you could say that if the sunspot activity was still quiet and hasn't even shown any kind of pickup, where there's,
okay. Well, you could say it based on this. So as the cycles change, the actual solar cycle is a 22-year cycle. You know that, correct? Each
right.
10 or 11 year, up to 12 or 13-year solar cycle is only half of the cycle. So the poles flip for 11 years, and then they flip back. So it takes a full 22 years, 2 cycles, to flip polarity from positive to negative to positive for a cycle, back to positive and negative.
Right.
So that's actually what happens every 2 cycles. Now, where was I going with this? I completely lost the thought.
Oh, no, well, what I was saying is
how
I know
say we're going into cycle 25, Scott, is that there has been some sunspot activity on the opposite hemisphere of the sun, which signals the shift into the next cycle, because the sunspots flip from majority on one side of the hemisphere to the other hemisphere during the polarity shift.
Okay.
So by seeing some activity on the opposite pole, they're claiming, but it could be just anomalous activity as the sun shuts down. We've never been at such a position in modern history. This is all unprecedented, uncharted territory. Anyone that's claiming that they know what's going to happen next is totally full of shit. Mm-hmm. But what we can know is all of the scenarios, which we point out on the channel, so that everyone is prepared for what. And the most probable one. The most probable one is that cycle 25 will start sometime mid-2020, and that by 2021, there'll be some major flaring that's going to fry portions of the grid on Earth. People are going to be going crazy. The markets are going to have crashed. A lot of people are going to be hungry.
Okay. And so the beginning of the 25th is where we're at the bottom of that cycle, the bottom of the negative, and we're starting to make our way back up again. So that's 20.
Yeah, but 24 is going to continue to diminish. Even NOAA's forecast shows 2019 being a 0 sunspot year. We could have no sunspots the entire year of 2019. We've had dozens of sunspots this year, so that would prove to the people claiming we're going into 25 that we're still going down in 24. We won't come out of 24 until sunspot numbers increase, which they are not. They're decreasing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, and it's my prediction.
I heard different perspectives.
Yeah, my prediction is more mainstream, but a little extreme, towards the extreme. But I think that we may see just 1 or 2 single sunspots in all of 2019. And it is going to be dead, meaning there'll be a period of 0 sunspots for over a year, starting May 2019, extending through May of 2020. 0 sunspots for 12 months. And that's the summer where major earthquakes and volcanoes go off, and it's going to be very bad for the planet. If New Madrid's going to trip, it's then. Winter 2019, 2020.
Oh, during the winter. That's
it's based on the work now coming out of with Ben Davidson and QuakeWatch.net. We now know that the massive 9.0s are triggered at that magnetic flexure point when the sun flips over to the next cycle. That moment is when the 9.0s come off. So whenever that is, we'll know, because that's when the next 9.2 is going to happen. And it'll be sometime winter 2019, 2020, probably be on the Ring of Fire, and it may also trigger New Madrid.
Okay. Is it magnetic? Is it a magnetic connection between the when the sun goes, flips cycle and the Earth responds? Is that a magnetic connection, or is that a at that point in time where our shields are down and we're hit by the maximum amount of cosmic rays at that point?
I would say ask Ben and the people working on that the answer. They're going to be coming with a clearer picture on what happens. We have telluric currents running through Earth. Obviously, they're going to switch over at that point. So it's major shifts in all the entities in our solar system that cause this shock, which triggers all major earthquakes. It's very clear when you go look at the graphics that Ben shows on his electroquake video. Only 35,000 views, needs to have 35 million in my opinion, but we'll leave links to the electroquake video below this conversation so you guys can get familiar with it. You can even win money over at QuakeWatch.net. You register and you start predicting earthquakes based on Earth spots and geomagnetic activity. That's basically how we do it. We're predicting earthquakes of 6 magnitude or greater. Anyone can predict lower magnitude earthquakes like Dutch Sints because they happen in a pattern. So if one area hasn't seen 5 magnitude like Indonesia, you're guaranteed to have one the next day. Those quakes follow a pattern and move around the plate boundaries on Earth in a regular periodicity. So it's easy to predict the lower ones based on patterns, but the higher magnitude quakes are impossible to predict using patterns, but very predictable using science. And that's what we're finding. It's the big quakes, the major ones that we're worried about. They kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people historically. And with the population density on Earth, who knows where the next major 9.0 will occur, but it's going to occur when we go from cycle 24 to 25, and that's going to occur in the winter of 2019 going into the spring of 2020, and unfortunately people are going to lose their lives. Guaranteed. That's a guarantee. Yeah.
So it does sound like it's likely an energetic connection between Earth and the rest of the solar system.
Absolutely, like a whip snapping too. Like,
is there any correlation between the cycle, this cycle that the sun's going to, descend into and then break out of at that point in time? Is that related at all to the sun's own pole shift movement? The poles on the sun itself, are they correlated at all, or are they just two different things happening at two different times?
The solar cycle is the shifting of the poles on the sun. So what is the question? So
is there a correlation between the movement of the poles on the sun and the solar cycle when it begins and ends?
Yeah, that is what defines it. So when the solar cycle is when the pole shift goes exactly halfway. When positive on top goes to positive on bottom of the sun. That's exactly one solar cycle. And then when it shifts back again, it's another solar cycle. So an actual pole flip on the sun, a full cycle, is 2 solar cycles that we talk about. People don't realize that. They think all solar cycles are the same thing. One is a positive-negative shift, and then the other one is back from negative to positive. So it takes 2 solar cycles for the sun to completely flip its polarity back to where it was before. One cycle flips it, 180 degrees, and then the next solar cycle flips it back. So the sun's pole flips during 2 solar cycles, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that makes it interesting too is how does the fact I'd heard that the sun has 2 poles. It has 2 norths and 2 souths. How does that come into play with the solar cycle?
Well, we have 2 norths and 2 souths as well. And that's a lot of our listeners are confused. So let's nip this in the bud. And we're going to go to you, Scott, the layman, and I want you to explain to me what I just said. The Earth has 2 north poles and 2 south poles. Go.
You want me to explain that?
Yeah, because
I was unaware until
explain why the sun has 2 poles.
Well, I didn't even know the Earth had 2 poles. I just heard that
and no
a month
one
or
else
so
does.
ago that.
Okay, so people watch YouTube channels and these alarmists or people looking for clicks. It's clickbait. They're not scientists. They're idiots and they're D-bags and they're lying to you and they're making people go crazy and learn bad information. What they're claiming is that the pole shift that's happening right now, which is a magnetic pole shift on Earth, has something to do with the rotational pole. So the planet Earth has a rotational pole, which we call the North Pole, where Santa lives. That's not the one that's moving. Santa always lives in the North Pole where the planet is spinning, where it's cold, and we call that the Arctic Circle. The pole that's moving is the magnetic pole. And even if the magnetic pole moves to the equator, the North magnetic pole will now be at the equator, which is going to happen in your lifetime in the next decade or so. The North Pole where Santa lives will still be up in the Arctic, where the planet spins, up in the north, where all the glaciers will still be. The magnetic pole has nothing to do with the temperature, the weather. The temperature and the weather have to do with the orientation of our Earth in the solar system. And up north it's cold, and down south it's cold on the poles, and the equator is warm, because that's relative to the orientation of the sun. When the magnetic pole flips, the Earth stays in the same position. It can't shift. It's locked in due to the magnetics of the solar system. So the rotational pole of the sun is staying constant while the magnetic pole flips during the solar cycle. So there's 2 poles of the sun, just like there's 2 poles of the Earth. And there's 2 poles of everybody. There's a rotational pole, and then there's a magnetic pole. And the magnetic poles can flip. Rotational poles cannot flip. If a rotational pole flipped, we'd all be dead.
Yeah. No, and I wasn't I am totally aware that the Earth spins spins around and that doesn't change at all.
It does change. It wobbles. It wobbles on a 26,000 year precession.
Right, but it doesn't make its way down to the equator. That's what I'm saying. So I get the thing that there's a physical pole where the Earth spins on an axis, and that there's a magnetic pole that meanders around. There's a magnetic pole.
No, it typically doesn't meander around. It's typically near the rotational pole. For the majority of geologic time, the rotational and magnetic poles stay together. And that's when there's all magnetic and electrical quiescence in the solar system. But due to a cosmic cycle, which we're just beginning to understand at a periodicity of 11,000, 12,000 years, or 26,000 years, the precessional cycle, there is a magnetic reversal that occurs, or magnetic wandering that occurs in a short period of time. We're talking a few hundred years, and it either flips or just wanders around and goes back. The majority of the time, it's sitting right up there with the rotational pole, and everything is okay. It is the times when the magnetic pole wanders that shit goes crazy in the solar system. And we're seeing it solar system wide. The dust storms on Mars, the dust storms on Earth, they're related, because all weather is related in the solar system, because planets are tiny compared to our sun, And our sun is enveloping all of us in its plasma sheath. So we are little magnets dancing in the plasma sheath of the sun, and it controls our weather quite well.
So what you explained as far as the Earth having two different kinds of poles, that I had picked up from, what you'd been talking about since I started listening. But the way I understood this conversation that I was listening to, they described, yes, the sun has a pole that it rotates on, physical pole that it rotates on, but it actually had two norths and two souths as far as magnetic. Is that false?
Oh, no, I'm sure it's 100% true based on what you're talking about. A lot of people, when they refer to the sun, are not really referring to the sun. Now, what is the sun in your opinion? What are you referring to when you say the sun has two poles? Are you referring to the hard inner sphere that we don't see, the part that's revealed through a sunspot, that sphere? Are we talking about the plasma sheath that's millions of miles thick and millions of degrees, or the corona? I mean, so when we talk about the sun, it's the package of all those things. People think that glowing ball you're looking at is a thing with a surface. The surface is very far below that glowing ball.
Mm-hmm.
So that the interior has its own magnetics and the exterior has its own magnetics.
I
similar
see.
To we could go outside to the Van Allen belts of Earth and show some crazy magnetics going on out there, independent of the sphere of our planet.
So, would it be fair to say that the sun has two different north poles and two different south poles, and they're both wandering right now themselves? Is 2 a valid number? I mean, could there be 8 or 50?
I really
or
can't comment on
2?
it. We could get Lee Wheelbarger in here, but we need a plasma physicist to tell us.
Yeah, because
that
was
some
what
of
they
them
were
are
describing.
still working on a sun as an internal combustion engine with the nuclear. It's waning down its material and eventually it will burn out, which is total nonsense. The sun is powered externally. So it's just like the black sun. We look inside when we see the sunspots. Our sun is cold and black. What's burning is the atmosphere above the cold black ferrite sphere, which is the sun. The sun is simply bending the plasma that comes through the Birkeland current and causing it into glow mode. And then
Kind of like a bulb or something? Kind of like a fluorescent bulb?
It's more like at Spencer's, the mall store, the plasma spheres you buy for $10, where you put your hand on it and the plasma comes out. The inner sphere is a cold black sphere, and on the outside is electricity. That is our sun. Our sun has an electrical sheath on the outside of a cold, dark center. There is no nuclear fusion happening in the center of the sun. It is a cold, dark ferrite mass, black as coal. It's cold. In fact, 7,000 degrees as opposed to 1,000,000 out in the photosphere, in the corona. And the science wants you to believe that somehow millions of degrees from the core comes through a 7,000 degree cool surface and then emanates out into the atmosphere, causing a 1,000,000 degree atmosphere. Total nonsense. The corona of the sun is hot because it's plasma in glow mode around a cold ferrite sphere. And this is basic electric universe. It's now being tested using this Sapphire project through Electric Universe private contributions. So check out Sapphire. I'll leave links to Sapphire below when we put this YouTube up too. It's worth your look. And if you got $1 million, donate it. So what they're doing is recreating a miniature sun. It's about 2 or 3 inches on Earth inside of this controlled environment, just like I told you.
So it's like an iron core, and they're going to introduce some gas and some electricity to it, and hopefully that core will be enveloped by a plasma sphere around it. Then,
the work has been going on for about 5 years now, and it's breathtaking. They've already basically made the sun. They've proven how a sun can be made based on our model, and exactly what they thought is exactly what they got, a sun, and it changes dynamics based on exactly how they thought it would change, which is bad news for humanity because the sun has the ability to simply, power down in an instant. If the sun powers down 50% in an instant because it's in a low glow mode, if the electricity that's powering the sun from who knows where, billions of light years away has a blip in it and our sun goes cold, the planet will drop in temperature 10 degrees in a day, which may be what happened when the mammoths froze with food in their mouth. Now, luckily, humans will be able to react and we'll all be lighting fires that day because it will be very cold. And if you're in a cold area already, you're going to, really be in harm's way. If the temperature drops 50 degrees and it's already minus 10, you might not make it.
Right. Well, I don't know about
if you're in Florida, you'll be pissed
listening.
And you'll be burning the couch.
Well, I want to speak for probably 99% of the people out there listening. And I think we all learned something in the sun that we had no idea before. So thank you for that.
Sorry, we got 30 more minutes. Clue. What else?
So the other thing, going back to some of the conversation we had before, and I wanted to I want to get your thought to. This is more of a, what would you call this? How things will organize, once things descend and there is no more, people don't have a job that they go to each day. There's probably no services or very services. And if, like you say, a lot of people die off, then I kind of have this vision, if you will, of kind of a feudal system kind of happening again, because there'll be a lot of people that will survive, but they don't have anything. And you were saying, here come 10 people up the road, with their flag, their white flags, but don't have any food. They don't have any protection. They're wandering. And do you, it so often happens, you could enable those people, say, oh, here's some land and here's some seed, and, make the best for yourself. But as people spread out, there's not as much protection as they're in close. So it's happened in the medieval time, if you will. There was a whole feudalism where, like, there's people that are willing to, that can somebody up and kill them, where there's other people that's just not, they are, but they're more than willing to do their part. And you can try and keep everything one layer of hierarchy. Hey, we're all the same. We're all going to contribute, and maybe that's what you shoot for. But a lot of times in society, things tend to go hierarchical. As hard as you try not to, they still do. So, do you see that? People will definitely come back together again in groups. And I've heard a number that like an optimal group, and you'll find this with hunter-gatherers, it's around 45 people, because if you move beyond 45 people, the human ability to understand everyone involved, what's going on, and the norms of the group, that things get out of control, move beyond that number. But you're big enough where you won't get run over necessarily, but yet you're small enough where everybody in the group, they know you, and everybody kind of falls into a position, where you're gonna you're going to plant and harvest, and you're going to take care of the animals, and you're going to stand at the fence and watch the road. And as time goes on, different jobs can have different importance, and hierarchies tend to evolve again. Do you see when society breaks down? Do you see people coming together? There'll be a lot of people that are prepared and they understand what's going on. I mean, a lot of people when this happens, they won't even know what's going on. They'll just be wandering and looking for a place to say, well, hey, if you guys take me in, I'll take care of your property for you and your chickens, but I just, can we have some eggs? So do you accept the idea that you would be a part of more of a hierarchic system as time goes on? Or would that be something that you would reject and try to not let happen?
Well, I think the way it will go in our lifetimes, if there's a grid down scenario and a major population reduction, if you're in a rural area like where I am, the local cities and administrators will want to continue to keep the system going. We could do it here in Pagosa with no electric. They started with no electric. So it's not hard to go right back to what we were doing in a really limited scale, try to help people that need help. We don't have that many people out here. Try to keep the stores open. There'll still be goods and services to buy and sell. And we're an agrarian society out here. Everyone will know they have to start growing food. And the limited amount that do, 10, 15%, will step up their game. People down on our road here will come together. And as time progresses, I believe the only way you'll stay safe is in a group. And so we'll build defenses and build community up to a limit. And then just like you said, once it reaches a certain size and time frame, there'll be break-off groups that go and do their own thing. But they'll know they can't leave unless they have large enough numbers for safety, and they'll have to be nearby. So we'll be slowly spreading from one area out. And the Hopi legend and the Hopi prophecy says the Four Corners area is where the sixth Earth will be built. It's where the rebirth begins. So, and that's kind of what I'm saying. You start in one place, everyone's safe, they change their way of life, and through time they slowly grow from there. You're not going to it's not like Little House on the Prairie. We just murdered all the Indians and we have all this empty land. Go run out and grab your piece. That's not how it is. If you go do that, you're dead. Because there'll be all these marauders, just like history. You have the Goths, the Huns, the Mongols. There will be marauders. It will be Mad Max time. They're not going to try to come into communities that have good security. They're going to try to they're going to be taking on all the little groups. They would never go into a big group that has all the guns and weapons because they're dead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can only charge in and surprise people so many times before you catch one yourself, catch a bullet yourself. I mean, maybe get away with it once or twice or 10 times, but eventually, you're going to get up in your mayhem. You're going to reap what you sow. So that's true. And so, yeah, and that was kind of my too is, as once things settle down, there will definitely people that have survived to a point that were savvy enough to survive, and they'll still have to find a place to help out and to find safety. And in the old days, it was very dangerous. I mean, most had a wall around them, and everybody stayed in very close. Maybe there was a cathedral or a church in the middle of this circular wall, and everyone lived inside. But yet it's only so big. There's people still live outside. But if there were, like you said, you marauders, if people were descending on the people could, even though they lived out the wall, they could quickly inside the wall. So, and that's the next step go to once you say, oh, I need to understand myself and I need to understand it's whether you like it or not, it's kill or be killed, maybe, if it gets to that. The next step beyond that versus, once the dust settles, everyone's standing, okay, we need to coalesce and get our community together and get enough people in the community that pose an obstacle for someone coming by. So anyway, that was just my thought. Is it's very natural for humans to create a hierarchy. There's always going to be people that don't want to be in charge, and there's going to be don't want to be in charge, and certainly can't see themselves assault someone else. But the people who are can make decisions, and the people that are the protectors, they tend to be looked up to. They tend to just gravitate to. You begin to stratify your community. So I guess you go into it understanding what the natural model is in a situation like that, and it might be helpful to understand how that coalesce, how a bunch of loose people can coalesce into a group and understand what that number of people is, and people listening, what skill are you going to bring to that group? So even though you even though you may be maybe work in a supply chain, and you work with contracts, and you're on the computer all day, and you go home at the end of the day with you're not gonna have anything to be helpful with. So the recommendation is to understand what it's like to live in a less complicated time, and it's learn to grow food, understand what that means, or learn animals, or husbandry, or like defense. If you've been in the military, prepare to offer that to the group. So definitely you want to go into a group with a white flag and a purpose, other than a white flag and just be a burden. So
yeah, I believe
anyway,
that people are going to seek out leaders at this time, people that know what they're doing. People on my road, that the older women or whatever that watch the show, they know that, this will be the go-to place if the shit hits the fan, and we're going to come together. At that point, we'll then decide as a community how we're going to protect ourselves, etc. We don't have to talk about that now. We're all in the same mindset that that's what will happen. And then, the go-to leader, the leader is the person that knows how to live sustainably. And he might give tasks to everyone because they'll be eager to help. And then through time, the way decisions get made in those situations is through anarchy, where it's all local. So you have a decision to make. We just all come together and we vote. Whatever we say is the answer. And eventually, when you have too many people with overlapping skills, that's the time then you have a break-off group. And you'll know that in the community because you'll all be talking about it. You'll be like, we have too many farmers, we have too many security people, and they're all pissing us off. And we're like, well, it's time for them to make the New World Part 3.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's too many people eating, and there's not enough people making the food or something.
Right.
Yeah.
The break-off time.
And, yep. So definitely there is a number that is sustainable, where everyone, where you can present a group that's big enough that it can defend itself, and yet small enough where it can stay, have some sort of like a family integration, like a tribe is, would be a common group of people where everyone knows each other, and it's not just a huge mass of people and someone's there assigning work and you go off and do your thing. and
yeah,
you're
so
just an
typically,
unknown vassal.
You don't want to go above 115 total, and that requires an inner circle of 7. So you can have 7 people in leadership roles for up to 115 people. Above that, you're talking problems. So never go more than 7 that know where all the supplies are and all that, and you're never going above 100 total in the community. And that requires 7 people that all you trust intimately.
Right.
It's hard to find 7 people. So you don't have to have that many. You could do 4 in the inner circle with 100 in the community.
Yep. So it's definitely something to think about. Once you've moved beyond the preparation and you're out there growing some food, it's like, okay, if I'm saying this is going to happen, and I'm pretty darn sure it is, then this is the next step is, these things that we've talked about tonight, spirituality, purpose, community, and, how will that community form? I mean, you're right now, you've collected a community up and down your road, but, as I look around, and I'm sure there's quiet little groups of people here and there, but there's not a lot of people that are thinking, they might have, 10 or 20 people in their group, but they certainly don't have 100. There's very few of those groups around. So it's definitely, it's going to happen naturally when the time comes, because people will gravitate to safety. But and for those people, it'll be difficult for them too, because it's like some are going to fall into a good community, and some are going to fall into a spider's web, where bad things can happen. So when you go looking for a community, you have to be careful. Maybe it'd be best if you stay off in a distance and just kind of see how that community works before you go walking down with your white flag, just to make sure you're not walking into bad situations. So, but no, that's interesting. So those were a few of the topics that I thought kind of round out the whole solution. Once you got all your stuff and you have an understanding what's going on, then what? Life isn't going to go on like it did. There's not TV. There is.
I mean, we're going to have enough DVDs and downloads and videos if they don't get fried from an EMP, but we'll even have tons of that stuff inside of an EMP shed. We'll be able to watch videos and play games using the sun until we die. I mean, I'm keeping old cell phones. Do you know how much time and inane stuff that you could do on a cell phone in the future? We could actually repurpose those apps, use the calculator app, things like that. So it's not like the end of everything. If you're smart, you can survive and thrive in the future. I'm not giving out all my secrets, because that's not what I'm here for. You can get your own secrets. You should start collecting your own secrets. You need to be thinking about the topics we're talking about, because most people have not thought that way. And you need to be prepared. So, I mean, as far as protecting yourself, I think that's the biggest thing, and that realizing the nature of the changes moving forward. But in the interim, there's going to be a whole bunch of panic and unrest in the interim. So you need to start right now. I think you need to be starting by thinking about protecting your finances and shifting to preparedness. And that doesn't mean a 401k, because in a moment in the next few years, if you have all your money in a 401k, that's good. That's going bye-bye.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. So how are you diversified, Scott?
Well, even though it's been down for a bit now, it's I tried to bucks in to see how that's going to go. So I'm doing some of, I've got some Bitcoin stuff going just to, if things don't totally break down but yet the dollar dies, at least if there's still some semblance of technology, which there could well be, I mean, I can see where certain things have been hardened and figured out, and I still think that there's probably how do I say it? As things decay and decay to a certain point, I still think that there's certain technologies that aren't too difficult. Like we have the satellites are all up there, and they're all used to getting bombarded, by cosmic rays and so forth. So those are designed to get beat up pretty bad. So maybe like your internet that you have is satellite based. So there could still be technology and internet, and there can still, if things don't descend too badly, things just decay. And I kind of look at, you look at like Venezuela or Argentina, places like that. Things have gotten very bad socially and economically, but it's still not total anarchy yet there. At least I don't believe so.
So if you can keep your grid up, if you can keep your power going, and you can keep your satellite running, you could probably access the internet and communicate with people, even when the grid is down. That is true. These are things you need to be thinking about. Yep. Which is why we have Lee Wheelbarger on the air. He's got the best hillbilly remedies and more technical advice than anyone in the arena. I mean, he's working for the DOD for decades, since 1989, on electronics expert and a information expert. They basically give him a topic, and then in a few weeks they ask him a bunch of questions, so they don't have to do the research. So, like, he knows what he's talking about. He doesn't make stuff up, and he bases all of his knowledge on facts and science, which is why I like the guy. Plus, he's a cool dude to talk to. All right, we got about 13 minutes. What else can we discuss?
What I would, and this, you can put this link also at the bottom of the show. You threw out this document that some friends of that you must have had communication with. This what's it called here? Let me scooch up top. Abundant Harvest Food Security. And I've been reading this, and it's really good. And you did the forward on it, I believe. Do you want to talk for a minute about what they put together there and how people can find that document? Well, you tell me your opinion. Did you read the PDF? Have you read the whole thing? Yes.
How many pages is it?
The pages, it's not real long. It's like 107. So it's a nice, concise. It's not a lot of fluff, and there's a lot of good topics in here.
Right, and the most important part is that it links to all of these important topics. So what Bill Porter did, and he is the research engineer for iGrow Organics. Go to igroworganics.com. Or just check the link to the book below. That takes you right to his website. What he's been doing, he's over in central China. He's been researching all the cutting-edge agricultural breakthroughs there for decades. Their solar greenhouse design. He was most interested in knowing, because I don't think the general public knows, there are tens of millions of people in every town in China, central China, literally billions of people. And he's wondering, and they all eat fresh and local, and they're all eating mostly vegetables, fresh vegetables every month of the year. And he had no idea how that's possible. There's no ships. There's no, you know what I mean? There's no like big ports. They're growing it all in locally. We're talking tens of thousands of tons of produce in each of these cities or prefectures. And he wanted to know how they're doing it, so he did his own research. And now what he did in the last year, because, you know, all of this new organic, which is all old information, is coming back to light. And it has been in practice over in Asia for hundreds and hundreds of years, since the 1400s. Some of the most insane farming practices that are have the best yields come from that region. and they're feeding billions of people locally. So what he did was his own research and made a concise book with links to all the cutting-edge stuff and products to make your attempt at being a farmer, the most seamless and abundant that it could possibly be. And what's exciting about the book is the amount of links. You could literally be clicking around and get lost on someone else's YouTube channel because of the book. So it supports all of the cutting-edge people doing all of the real growing and the real type of biodynamic agriculture that we're going to be doing in the future. F Monsanto. We don't need monocropping. We need biodiversity, because if we're feeding ourselves, we need all the nutrients coming in.
Yeah, and so he's got just this greenhouse here that he has where it's like half, the back half of it, he's growing mushrooms to introduce CO2 to help the plants grow better within the greenhouse. And I thought, wow,
isn't that insane?
Who would have thought?
It's a type of technology that they invented in China where they made these filters. So in the mushroom room, they're extracting the CO2 that the mushrooms are creating out of the air, and they're concentrating it in these CO2 tanks that can scrub out the CO2 from the mushroom side in total darkness. And then at the right time, because CO2 enrichment has to happen directly at the plant, only during daylight, so it has to be coming out at the right exact time when the plant's feeding. Some plants feed at night, called nightshades, so the CO2 would have to be sprayed on them at the right time. And this automated system does all of that for you, which increases yields it's insane, up to 50%.
Yeah, that's doubling your greenhouse for nothing.
Well, you're using a little pump to double the yield. And you're also growing mushrooms as well as greens. Now, mushrooms are going to be great for the grand solar minimum because in areas with reduced sunlight, you're going to have vitamin D deficiency, and they're in mushrooms. So you need to be in a community that knows how to wild harvest mushrooms or grow their own. And what Bill just informed me recently is that he's going to be putting out an entire series of books. Abundant Harvest was the first. In a month or so, I'm not sure the timeline, he's going to do Abundant Honey, where they're going to offer an introductory honey kit package that's cheaper than any, beekeeping kit on the market, because they're quite expensive and beekeeping has become popular. But this Abundant Honey, because his son, who lives in Indiana, is a beekeeper, is an expert on natural beekeeping. Like, we don't use medication or any of that garbage out here. Unfortunately, if you live in a city or where there's modern agriculture, you usually can't do the type of beekeeping we're doing because of varroa mites and other nonsense. But they're going to be coming out with a whole series of books, Abundant Honey, Abundant Mushrooms or Fungus, because there's a new technology coming out where you can get logs delivered directly to your house that are frozen. Just put them out in a dark tent, and you can have, hundreds of kilograms of mushrooms in just 10 days. Absolutely insane. Yeah, these are inoculated logs. They'll cost a few dollars each. They'll produce $100 worth of exotic mushrooms.
And the beauty of it is you don't have to, never say never, but there's a pretty good chance that all those mushrooms on there, they're that they're edible, correct?
Yes.
That they have out there in their mushroom. So I didn't want to assume it, because you don't want to assume that with mushrooms, but the point being, if you have a greenhouse that has a mushroom department, if you will,
yes,
that the mushrooms there are edible, and if you don't have to go out into nature and take a chance at poisoning yourself, it's like this collection here is something that you can consume. So that's good.
No, actually, let's talk about this technology real quick with the public, because what we're looking to do, these groups over here, they're actually developing these logs in hundreds of varieties. We're talking dozens of oyster mushrooms, shiitake, porcini, portobello, anything you want. You can literally start your own mushroom business overnight by purchasing a shipping container of these logs and putting up a mushroom tent. So it's just being developed. it's all extremely organic because this has to be done in extremely sterile conditions with, completely inoculated. The only thing they can be putting in the log is the spore of the mushroom. Any contaminants would absolutely destroy the fungus. So there's only one way to grow fungus, and that's in a very pristine environment. So you know what you're getting, and once you get it, in just a few weeks is your first full harvest. So it's completely insane, the technology that we're looking at. And if you could set something like this up in a few years, imagine the abundance and the self-sufficiency you're going to gain, because you're going to have the time to figure out the systems and to be the most abundant at it.
That's amazing. So yeah, so I just wanted to bring out for everybody that you had presented this document on I think it was one of your daily shows, and I downloaded it, and it was just an excellent read, excellent. So yeah, we'll definitely have to put that out there for people, and I'm definitely going to use it to start going through and seeing what types of things I can just do myself here. Living in the city, can't do some of these things, but most of them I can get to here. And it's a good, concise read.
Did anything that struck you that would be, something you would immediately want to get into? Because tell the people out there, you've only dabbled in growing in the last year or so. In fact, right? Like 2 years.
Yeah, like a year. Yeah, like last summer is when I first started. Kind of thinking things might be heading south. So I wanted to. And it's one thing to, you can go out and buy a gun and a knife and a compass and a box of freeze-dried food, but then what? You realize that it doesn't matter how much food you go and buy, it's going to run out if you don't have a way of growing your own food. So that became my very next thing is to begin trying to grow my own, some type of food. Not that I've replaced what I eat each day, but I definitely wanted to have the experience of trying to grow something and see if I could find something edible that I could not kill. Well, so the first summer, pretty much everything I tried died. Half of it's I live in Arizona, so it's just blasted hot whether you could put it in the sun or shade it, it's still hot out for a lot of plants. So I think a lot of things pooped out just because they weren't really for this area. And so I tried this year, and so I talked to some people at the nurseries and that, and like one of the things that we did, that this will be a good thing going forward for people. If you like figs, I had bought a peach tree, apple tree, and a fig tree, and I planted all of them. And the peach and the apple tree, the little fruit came off of that, but the fig tree is just amazing. I've got just tens. Every few days there's another 3 or 4 good collection of figs that come off there, and they're delicious, and they're just like the ones you get in the store, by golly. And the thing is it was producing fruit right away. So one of the problems with I want to have some fruit trees or some nut trees is a lot of time it takes, some of these things take years before they start producing anything. And then
Not
of course,
the
fig was just like bam, it was good food and very good for you, and it was like big plump juicy figs right from the get-go, and it was like
I
just
can agree,
watered
Scott. So we got fig trees going here, and if you're listening out there, if you want to survive and thrive in the future, you're thinking permaculture, get a fig, zone 6 or higher, or you need a geothermal greenhouse. But figs produce big time, and they make lots of delicious sweet fruit. And they don't have much in the way of space for fruit. As much space as you put in, you get figs per square foot. We're about to end. Scott, it was an awesome